Well, once again, as I mentioned earlier, thank you all for coming out this morning, for being part of this. The quality of education that we offer in Southwest Riverside County is very important to our members, because that's part of the quality of life that we sell down here. Our members don't just sell homes, we're selling an entire package, a quality of life. And certainly in Southwest County, that's very, very important. And you all play a critical role in that. So I know our members are very interested in what you'll have to say today. And again, we thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. We'll start with quick introductions here. Just, take 5 minutes, tell us who you are, how long you've been in your current position, and a little something special about your district. We'll get to the questions here in just a little bit, but first of all, just by way of self-introduction, start at the top of our panelist list here as printed with Dr. Christy Barrett from the Hemet Unified School District.
Good morning, everyone. So pleased to be part of the conversation this morning. One of the things we speak to frequently in the communities that we serve is that the walls of the school district should be permeable, meaning that it's through the collective effort of various systems and organizations in our communities that we ultimately impact the quality of life of the areas in which we reside. So with that being said, here in Hemet Unified School District, we very much appreciate the partnerships that we have with the various entities here within our community. Also, I would just say in terms of myself, I'm concluding my 4th year as the superintendent in Hemet. I would just say on a very personal note that I absolutely love being part of this community. I relocated to the Valley when I was given the opportunity to be in this position, and I do not regret that, and absolutely just love not only being at the helm, but also being part of the Valley. With that being said, I think something that is unique about our district, one, we serve a lot of communities. We serve over almost 700 square miles geographically is the region that we cover. And I think another thing that I would share with you, and it's for a much more in-depth conversation than just an introduction, but we were the only district in the state of California selected to have a partnership with the Hewlett Foundation. And so, and I think what's important also to note is that we did not go looking for Hewlett. Hewlett came looking for us, and it is because of the work that we are doing around educating our children, and specifically our families that have traditionally been furthest from opportunity. And so hopefully we'll have an opportunity to share more with you today about what it is that the school district is doing in leading these efforts. Thank you, Gene.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Dr. Doug Kimberly from the Lake Elsinore Unified School District. You're still muted, sir.
Is that better?
There you go.
Gene, thank you very much. I truly respect your comments in the opening as well, because I think my colleagues and I truly understand the importance of school districts and a sense of community and a lifestyle here in Southwest Riverside County. We talk about that often as superintendents and districts, and how we can continue to support all the communities throughout Southwest Riverside County. So it is an important role that we understand and relish as well. This is my 9th year as a superintendent in Lake Elsinore Unified. And prior to that, I was superintendent in Santa Maria, California. So it's my 12th year as a superintendent in the state of California. And I can say, certainly as we can all attest at this point, a very unique point in California history and world history, and certainly in public education that we are going through. But there's a lot of things that are what I'd like to say even normal now in Lake Elsinore. One, because construction has been deemed essential, we are still underway with the construction of a new elementary school in the Albert Hill neighborhood. It's a neighborhood of 400 homes that's anticipated to be well over 8,000 homes at build out. And so that would be important to most of the constituents on this call, I would assume. We plan to open that elementary school in the fall. We plan to open that elementary school with 400 students that have enrolled as well. And we'll see if those plans change, if there is some remote learning at the new elementary school, or if we're brick and mortar with social distancing, or what the fall actually brings on. And I would imagine we'll address those kinds of questions as the call goes on. We are really excited, though, to continue to offer things to our community that make value for people who move to Lake Elsinore. We have a dual immersion language program at our elementary school at Railroad Canyon that we have 300 students that are learning Spanish and English at the same time as they prepare for their secondary education. They move on to our International Baccalaureate program at Temecula Canyon High School so they can continue their language acquisition and their globalization of the world economy through language. We offer a robust programs in CTE with medical careers, engineering, as well as agriculture, including a brand new hydroponics program at Elsinore High School that is on our agriculture farm as well. So we're looking at traditional methodologies as well as what the future holds in agriculture. So we are very excited about the future and really glad to be a part of the community and very pleased to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Steve Kennedy from the Menifee Union School District. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this panel. This is my 32nd year in education, my 8th year as superintendent for the Menifee School District. We are one of the fastest growing areas in the state of California, as many of you already know. In the works right now in terms of plenty of new schools. Matter of fact, what the city has been, we've been working with the city and they're talking about we're going to triple in size over the next 20 years. That's a significant amount of growth, and we're trying to manage that growth in as solid a manner as possible so that we're making sure all of the needs of our students are taken care of. Middle school number 4 is going to begin construction within the next 6 months, and it is in the Audie Murphy Ranch area of Menifee. We also just finished our newest elementary school, Tawila, which means reading place to the Pechanga Indian Nation. And so we actually worked with them in order to kind of help develop some foundational pieces for that, for the students that are attending that school. We have just finished the purchase of some property out by the area where Paris High School's newest high school is going to be built. And that all of our district right now, we're sitting at about 11,000 kids. To show you the kind of growth we're experiencing, when I got to the district 15 years ago, we had about 6,000 students. So we've almost doubled in this period of time, and we obviously are going to be doing a lot more growth. But once again, our biggest priority is going to be how we are supporting the needs of our students and allowing our students to maximize their academic experience with us. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Next up is Patrick Kelley from the Murrieta Valley Unified School District. Welcome, Patrick.
Good morning, Gene. I want to thank SRCAR for putting this on. You have always been an organization that's been extremely supportive of the schools, and that has been indicative of, I think, why there is excellence in Southwest Riverside County with the education systems. I personally I'm concluding my 8th year as superintendent for Murrieta Valley, but I'm finishing my 30th year within the community and working for Murrieta Valley Unified School District. And I think that is something that characterizes many of the colleagues that are here today. We have always approached our positions not so much as a job, but that we are a member of the community. We want the very best for the community. And even as we are thrown challenges, and this is a doozy, this is the biggest we've ever seen, we're committed to working with it, working through it, and most certainly we're going to come out of this and we're going to come out in a stronger way. I think one of the things for the participants to listen today that you're going to hear is you're going to hear a lot of choice options emerge as we are all navigating waters that have not been sailed before. It is going to require that we think outside the box, and you're going to see some wonderful things emerge from the school districts in Southwest Riverside County in regards to that. We serve almost 24,000 students here in Murrieta Valley Unified School District, and we're very proud that in 2018 we were named as the first California exemplary district for the county. I'm honored to be able to serve our community, and I'm honored to be able to serve next to my colleagues who do a tremendous job in their communities as well.
Thank you, Patrick. Dr. David Pyle from Jacinto Unified School District. Welcome, Doctor. Still got your mute on, sir.
I thought we had everyone was able to read lips, so my apologies. I appreciate the opportunity to join the group, Gene. I'm in a bit of a transition right now. I've had 23 years in public education, 17 of which here in Riverside County. Most recently, I've been serving in the role of superintendent for the Newview Union School District, finishing up my 8th year, and I'll officially begin as superintendent in San Jacinto June 1st. So I'm very eager to hear from my colleagues in Southwest Riverside County. I know San Jacinto has a lot to be proud of. One of our big tasks right now, we're mid-construction on the new Monte Vista Middle School, still set to open in the fall of 2021. Really looking forward to getting back to in-seat instruction for our students. I think that's where the best work happens. I think that's where our teachers feel most comfortable. But in the meantime, we will continue to ride this ride and take on the challenges as they come.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Tim Ritter, Superintendent from Temecula Valley Unified School District. Welcome, Mr. Ritter.
Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I am finishing up my 10th and final year as Superintendent of Temecula Valley Unified. Our family moved here to the Valley 20 years ago, and I've been a part of this community and this school district for those 20 years. And like I said, 10 years as the superintendent. One of the things that I've really appreciated about this community that I am honored to serve is the partnerships that we have with so many of the community members, including our realtors, who I feel provide a symbiotic kind of relationship. It's mutualistic in the fact that you bring families and put them in homes in our school districts, and then it's our job to serve them. And I think the people on the screen have all been invested in providing the best possible service for their students they can, which works for all of us, and most importantly for our students. People have been talking about some of the growth in their area. We're at about 27,000 students in Temecula, and we've been on a slight decline for the last 6 or 7 years. Not dramatic, but just small in number, but in certain pockets. For us, it's been the French Valley. We continue to see quite a bit of growth. And so for the 2021-2022 school year, we will be opening, which is currently referred to as Middle School 8, but it's actually our 7th middle school. And it won't even truly be a traditional middle school. It will open as one, but it will be a K-8 school, which will be the first one in our district that serves students actually TK through grade 8, because that area is so impacted both at the elementary level and at the middle school. So we're looking forward to that. I hope that we have a chance to talk a little bit about programs today, and I think everybody on here today will speak to the fact that not only do we provide outstanding opportunities for students who want to move on to college, it's been a big push in all of our districts to provide a more balanced college to career type of experience for our students. And one of the things that I think we're probably all proud of is the growth in our career technical programs at all of our schools and our districts, over the past few years to provide greater opportunity for our students to explore not only those college preparatory programs, but also to gain some skills and experience in career acquisition and prepare them to be competitive as they leave our schools into the world. So thank you again.
Thank you, and your point is very well taken, and we've appreciated. I know all of the schools have instituted those alternate career paths because not everyone is destined for a college education, and so stepping up and providing those alternatives is critical. Let's get to a couple of specific questions. We'll start with kind of a specific one, actually, and we'll get a little more general in a minute. But you know, one of the tragedies of this is that graduating seniors have lost those last few precious weeks or months with friends, oftentimes that they've grown up with, that they've gone to school with for many years. They've lost that last you know, the last football games, the last band concert, the last school play. So what will you as a district be doing specifically for the seniors, or what you do to help them through this, provide some formal or informal graduation program? And I'll go ahead and start with Patrick Kelley.
All right. Well, thank you, Gene. Yeah, this this class of 2020, they're being shaped in ways that they didn't ask for, and they certainly didn't deserve. And have been thrown a curveball in regards to having so many rites of passage and opportunities be taken from them. So, you know, in today's circumstances, we're doing our best to try to create some experiences. And it's interesting because we surveyed both our students and our parents in regards to the different types of things that they're hoping to see. And what's interesting is our parents want to see and have a visual of their kids walking across that stage and receiving that diploma. The students, while they certainly value that, they lean heavily toward they want an experience with their friends, closure, an opportunity to do many of the fun things that they had. So, you know, we're trying to do our best with making some lemonade out of lemons in regards to the stay-at-home orders that are in place. But we are, in fact, this week is the big week for our high school students, where they come to the school in their cap and gown. They can bring family who can have that visual, and we're going to have them walk across the stage, receive their diploma. And that's going to be photographed, and that's going to be filmed, and that part is going to be uploaded to the graduation ceremony that students can then view on the day and time that they actually would have held the live ceremony. What we've committed to our students is when things clear up, we're going to come back to them and say, what would you like us to do and help support and help facilitate in order that you can have some more closure? And so that's, you know, we won't know that timeline today. But what we're committed to is when that timeline does open up, we're going to come back to our students and help facilitate that get together, that closure that our students are so badly needing.
Thank you, Dr. Pyle.
A very similar set of activities as to Mr. Kelley's activities taking place in Murrieta are going to be occurring in San Jacinto. We'll have our seniors coming tomorrow night to officially pick up their cap and gowns. Many of the staff members are going to be there to cheer them on. We'll have a DJ, music, trying to really create that sense of excitement that obviously doesn't replace your typical graduation, but at least it's the right send-off considering the circumstances. We also surveyed the community and found overwhelmingly so that people really do want to get together in a more traditional environment to celebrate their accomplishments. And we're planning on doing so when the time is right. So we can't predict when that time will be, but once we receive the all clear, we will have more of a traditional celebration to celebrate the seniors, even if it is, you know, a month or two away.
Mr. Ritter.
Very similar. We actually started last week. One of our high schools has already filmed. 95% of their graduates attended the opportunity to walk across the stage, receive their diploma with their family present and able to watch them in a safe and socially distanced manner. They also have videotaped talent, student talent. That means different students that are performing musical pieces, both vocally and instrumentally, speeches, a number of things that make it as close to a traditional graduation as we possibly can. It was 16-hour days, 4 days for our staff at Great Oak High School, which did this last week. Chaparral begins today, and Temecula Valley, I believe, later this week. So our high schools are all moving forward with this virtual model that attempts to replicate the traditional experience as much as possible, and also engage and allow parents to be a part of it, because that was, as Mr. Kelley stated, probably the biggest concern coming from parents, the fact that they didn't get a chance to see their students graduate. For the kids, as has already been stated, they want a social gathering. They want a chance to come together. So it's our commitment that when large public gatherings are permitted, to plan later in the summer, probably August, a get together for students that are available and want to, because one of the things that, like they have stated, they want to see their friends, but they also want to see their teachers. They also want to see their administrators, the people that have been important to them in their high school years. So August seemed like a time when we could conceivably begin thinking about bringing people back together. So that's our target, if possible. So it's both the virtual graduation, replicating a traditional model, plus plans for a social gathering later in the summer.
Excellent. Dr. Barrett.
Yes, I don't want to make any assumptions. So I think what I'll start with is graduation ceremonies, along with all other decision-making regarding as to when students come together or how students come together. We as superintendents are not making these decisions in a vacuum or based on our opinion of what should or shouldn't happen. Our decision making is very much guided by the recommendations of public health, and the existing executive orders are in place. I just share that because I think we all feel for our children, our students, our families, and I think at times there's misinformation in our communities about how the magic happens as it relates to decision making. So I think it's just important for everyone to know that. With that being said, we've done multiple things to celebrate our seniors, and this hits close to home for me because I also happen to be a parent of a senior. My son was born the year of 9/11 and is graduating the year of COVID-19. So all of that to say, we have purchase yard signs for all of our seniors and also for our 8th graders that are promoting for middle school. And those are actively being distributed because we do recognize that this is in fact a milestone and we want that to be celebrated. In addition, as the others have stated, we are doing some type of graduation or commencement ceremony. We too had our first last week out in Anza at Hamilton High School. And so what we're doing is actually twofold. One, we are creating a virtual graduation setting, and we are wanting that to be of very high quality. So we are filming our students individually in a very controlled environment with just a very classy backdrop that represents what the space would look like at the traditional commencement ceremony. So for example, our Hemet High School graduates normally graduate at the Ramona Bowl, which is not available because it's under construction. And so that, but we've been able to create that as the backdrop and actually have footage of our students walking across the stage, and all of that will be put into a virtual ceremony that will be broadcasted through YouTube, Facebook, as well as the local channel here in the Valley. In addition to that, we are also having our students drive through so that they have an opportunity to be celebrated in that way as well. And that is what happened in Anza this past week, and then Hemet High and the others are following this week. And the last thing I would say that we're doing for graduation is that we have created graduation gift boxes for each one of our students, and in those boxes are their tassels and the brochure, that's not the right term for it, but the pamphlet that normally would be given out at the commencement ceremony. There's also a commemorative one of those placed in their boxes along with some other items. So big picture, all of those pieces together is how we're celebrating our students.
Excellent, thank you. Dr. Kimberly.
Well, first and foremost, I think we all agree that the class of 2020 is getting a little bit of the short end of the stick when it comes to our social rite of passage of graduation. It's something they've worked for a long time. It's something that families and parents relish the opportunity. And in our society, I do believe it is a rite of passage. With that, we are trying to duplicate that as much as we possibly can. We too plan to have a virtual graduation that will be on YouTube Live as well as Facebook Live. With yard signs that have been distributed a week or so ago throughout our district to celebrate the class of 2020, and as well as looking to have a diploma pickup with a cap and gown opportunity. As was mentioned earlier by my colleagues, the chance for families to celebrate in a cap and gown and take photographs, we've heard from all corners of our community. That's extremely important, that people want to share that opportunity with their children and with our teachers and staff. So to the degree that we can with social distancing, we'll have our staff involved in that in some form or fashion. But it's difficult with social distancing requirements at this point to see how much flexibility we'll have. I don't know that the pictures of our teachers and administrators in masks and gloves have quite the same allure that they might otherwise in that regard. We're also planning to put together a celebration for the class of 2020 when it is safe to do so. We don't anticipate that being this summer, given the guidelines that we're under. So we're looking to do something after the fall, kind of around the winter break for our graduates who want to try to come back and plan a celebration at that point. It just seems though, as some of the questions I've seen on the chat, when we look to what school may look like in the fall, and between that and high school athletics, that the chance for bringing large groups together this summer seems pretty remote. And so we're planning on a little longer time than that. Thank you.
Dr. Kennedy, you have the final word on this one.
So we're a K through 8 district. So we do have a promotion for our graduating or promoting 8th graders. And we will be doing an exercise that involves the staging of their vehicles in with their families, setting up a receiving line, and then they will be provided with a certificate at the end as they reach the end of the receiving line. I agree with all of my colleagues. This has been just a very, very different situation for all of the graduating seniors from high school, but class of 2020 is going to have a special place in our memory for probably the rest of our lives.
Thank you. Moving on to a little bit more about the reopening. I know a couple of weeks ago, the county voted to lift closure restrictions on vocational and higher education schools. And I know you're all working very closely with them. Some people in chat seem to have the idea that you folks can just open up whenever you want, which we know is not the case. So any idea when when lifting the ban might be expanded to include your districts, and when you might be looking at a reopening date? I know we've heard July as a possibility. That seems to be stretching out a little further right now, but any idea on your part? And I know part of it comes down to obviously the the governor's decree and his staging efforts to get the state reopened. And a lot of it depends on that. So any idea, just a kind of a shot in the dark or a guess on your part, when we may be looking at doing that and how that will ramp up? And we'll start this with Tim Ritter.
Thanks. It's obviously I don't have any answer that's definitive at all, which is the biggest challenge I think all of us are facing. Right now, we're targeting August 12th as our startup date, and that was the date that we were scheduled to start up with. But with that said, we have no idea what that's going to look like. We have 4 different think tanks going on right now within our organization to look at everything from a traditional type of school environment to hybrid school environments to the extreme as all distance learning. So we are absolutely in the dark in terms of what it will look like, but we're preparing for all different options in terms of what it could look like. You know, and when you hear conversations around providing environments that are socially distanced, fewer kids in classrooms, lunch service in classrooms, all of those things create tremendous challenges organizationally, and especially as you move up into most all of our high schools in our county. I mean, you're looking at 2,000 to 3,500 kids, and that becomes a tremendous challenge when you start to talk about having multiple lunches or how we're going to navigate the potential challenges of social distancing to keep our kids safe and our staff safe. So the answer to your question is right now, like I said, we're targeting August 12th, which was our original day, but we truly don't have an understanding at this point in time in terms of what that will look like. And I'm sorry for the vagueness of that answer. I've had meetings recently with our ASB directors, our athletic administrators last week, and everybody's asking the same questions, and we keep giving them the same answer. We just truly do not know. But we're preparing to do the best we can in response to the direction we're given when we are finally given direction.
Thank you. Dr. Barrett, is your crystal ball any clearer?
Nope, it's just as muddy as Tim. So I think, you know, for us, and I just want to restate, you know, what you've already said, Jean, and that unfortunately we don't get to ultimately make the decision as to when we reopen. What we are planning for is exactly what he stated, is we're going to plan on opening at our regular date, the first part of August. But what we're doing is we are currently in the process of creating a continuum of what school might look like. I think we're going to be hard pressed that there will not be some level of expectation that we open up in some fashion. I mean, just the implications on the economy. I think we're going to be pressed to open. The question is, what is it going to look like? And so with that, we're designing a continuum that, you know, spreads the gamut, right? What does it look like if it's school as normal with, you know, maybe needing to wear face masks, etc., all the way to what if we can't return to classrooms and there's an expectation that we remain in this distance learning space. And so right now that's how we're strategizing, because we don't want to let this happen to us. And I think all of us on this call are in those types of planning spaces. The other thing that I would share with you is that we are working closely with the Riverside County Office of Education, because even though we're representing south part of the county, we certainly know that there are many other districts that are part of our county. And so we're trying to all strategize and have some resemblance to how this will look across the county. The other thing that I would say is 2 things. One, keep in mind that we as individual school districts, each of our context is very different, meaning that some of us are better in a different space as it relates to the technology that we have, our ability to deploy it to families, connectivity as it relates to internet access. Each of our contexts is different. And so with that, you know, we're having to just be mindful of, on the continuum, right now we are not in a space of distance learning. And I'm taking that in a very broad stroke. What we are doing is we are COVID-19 responding. And that is very different. Quality instruction doesn't happen just because you put a device in the hands of the kid, right? There's a lot that happens to make that interaction meaningful. So I think we're all in a space of, what does this look like if we don't return back normal? And how do we do it much better than what maybe we're currently doing, given that we didn't have any time to develop a response? I guess the last thing that I would say in this is that not only are we concerned about how do we bring back our children, but we're also concerned about what are the potential budget implications, right? Life isn't just as simple as bringing kids back. We know that in the state of California that the revenue is going to be hit hard, and that then has implications for school districts. So just to lob this out there right now, what we are anticipating as a result of the May revise by Governor Newsom is a 10% cut in the 2021 school year. And so once again, our individual context matters, and there will need to be some very big decisions around that. And to think that that doesn't affect what learning looks like in our classrooms is false. So there's a lot for us to contemplate here in the public education space.
Thank you. I've got a question coming up later about the May revise and kind of your responses to that as well. Dr. Kimberly.
Well, I think that as crystal balls go, mine is not any better than probably the rest of my colleagues on this panel. And we too are planning to open August 12th, either with a remote opportunity or traditional or something in between, a hybrid, if you will, of both of those. It's important for communities and schools to work together. And I think we realize our role in the community in getting people back to work. We're also looking to do, through the summer, a virtual summer school to allow for some closing of the gap of learning loss that has taken place. And I think that's an important consideration, that for the most part, we look at schools traditionally in the fall and through the spring, but we're pretty much year round, and we continue to go. And I would say that our schools aren't closed right now. We do have a COVID response distance learning. And so our teachers and kids are interacting on a daily basis. And that interaction is really important, and that learning is taking place. And we're getting better at it every day. We see more and more kids and families logging on and engaging and interacting. And I think that we're on the precipice of changing education, that I don't think distance learning, irregardless of when schools open, is going away. It'll be part of education as we go forward in some form or fashion. So if there's a silver lining in this pandemic, it may be that we've had a cultural shift in education and some opportunities for kids and families they would not have otherwise had in their education. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kennedy.
So once again, like my colleagues have said, it's very hard to determine. However, a good friend of mine, Richard Carranza, he's the chancellor of the New York City schools, the largest school district in the nation. He likes to say, never let a crisis go to waste. And essentially, that's kind of what we are doing right now. We're reimagining what our schools and what our academic programs look like. We have a start date set for August 13th. And we are developing contingencies that are going to be based upon whatever the current restrictions are with regard to social distancing, with a mind to keeping our students and our staff safe. And that's going to probably mean a combination of distance learning and regular in-person school until such time as we are allowed to make things go back to some semblance of normal. But normal is going to be different, I think, as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Kelley.
All right, Gene, thank you for the statement that you started with. We do talk with people who believe that we can flip a switch and be able to make things happen. And we do have to follow guidelines that are in place, whether we like them or not. one of the things that we've done for Murrieta is, knowing those constraints that we're going to have, whether we like them or not, is getting a sense from our parents about what it is that they're thinking about right now. And it's important to note that what they're thinking about in may change in July, may change in August or September. And one of the tasks that is going to be important for schools to do is to be able to move back and forth between those things and be able to provide to the greatest extent that we can what it is that parents and students need at that time. So we put out a survey to our parents, and we realized it's kind of a point in time. And it wasn't to indicate anything specific in regards to this is what we're doing and how we're doing it. It was truly to get a sense, sticking our finger into the wind to see how strongly it's blowing and which way for parents. So the results were, I don't want to say they were surprising, but I think they solidified where we were thinking things were falling. About 2/3 of our families say we want things to get back to the way they were. We want a traditional setting, and that's what we want to have. It's important to note that's what we want to have as well, and we're going to do everything we can to work to that end. That is the number one fallback position, and that's what we're going to be going for. And even though we may not always hear about it, that is the position that we're going for. But it's important to reflect that a solid third of our respondents stated at this point, 3 months in advance of returning to the school year, that they wouldn't be ready for that. They didn't want their kids to come back to a traditional setting at this time. And so they wanted choice. They wanted opportunities. Some were to remain completely virtual, and many were to be in kind of a hybrid model. So what we're working with, and it's the same that our colleagues in the other districts are doing as well, is we're trying to create those choices. So if we have a high schooler who wants to take most of their coursework virtually and online, we can provide that. Yet they want to come for band, or they want to come for drama. We're going to do our very best to be able to say yes. Let's be able to try to design that and create that so they can do it. There isn't any organization out there, any school organization, whether it's private, whether it's charter, whether it's public, that is going to be able to fully make their own rules. So you're going to see a lot of choice emerge, and I'll echo what Dr. Kimberly said. This has pushed us very quickly to be able to reimagine the types of things that can happen and what can occur. So we're excited about that. We believe that the quality of what's being offered in the fall, and we're set to begin on August the 12th as well, will be greatly enhanced. I think it was Dr. Barrett. She said it very well. What's occurred in these 2 months since the school closures were mandated was a response to a health crisis. And like many, flipping our model of delivery has been difficult, but we're learning as we go through it. And so those who select that option coming in the fall, they're going to see something very different and higher quality across the board. But at the core, we're looking for people to be able to default to choice as much as they want, and try to meet families where they're at.
Thank you. We'll finish with Dr. Pyle. Folks, remember, our members are looking for a definite date here, so everybody else has waffled on it. Don't let us down.
I'll waffle more than the others. I promise you that. And just as a reminder, I don't officially start my tenure in San Jacinto until June 1st. So I wouldn't want to speak specifically to the hard work that the team is doing prior to my arrival. I do know that we are very similar to the other districts in the county in regards to preparing for multiple different options. Each of us sitting on the panel today, we were part of a meeting, as we are each and every Monday morning with the county superintendent and all the other superintendents in Riverside County. So we're there probably won't be a whole lot of variety in regards to an actual date when that time does come, But I would like to, again, echo what Dr. Kimberly stated is we often hear that schools are closed and when are they going to reopen? And the fact is we are open. It's just in a very different setting. One thing, a perfect example of that is what we're still doing for our communities. I received a note in San Jacinto. We issued and delivered 26,890 meals just last week for both breakfast and lunch. And I know the other districts are doing the same. We're still serving, not necessarily in the traditional way, but we're definitely reaching out to our community, and we're definitely making sure that we're providing them resources during these times.
Appreciate that. I know they've done it pretty much across the board with continuing school meals and so forth, which is a very critical service to a lot of students who may not otherwise have that option. Next question, there appears to be a kind of a wide variance, and I know this was dropped into your laps really without any notice, as it was to most everybody else, but a wide variance in the at-home instruction, with some students attending daily Zoom meetings, others it's every few days, some not at all. Some have daily requirements to perform, others have a lesson that includes going outside and taking a picture with a sign, which is, a 20-minute exercise at best. Moving forward, will there be a more standardized approach, and how will the equity difference be addressed when school does start up again? I mean, you're going to have some students that are probably right on track and who have taken this very seriously, and their parents have taken this very seriously. You're going to have other students who have lost a half a year or more. So how do you address those differences? And I'll start this with Dr. Kennedy.
So this is really the critical question as we move forward. We are all interested in providing engaging, interactive opportunities for all learners at the level that they are coming to us with. And so doing that in Menifee, we're utilizing a Google Classroom platform where teachers spend a certain amount of time each day with the entire class, and then they have specific activities and things that they have to do on their own. At the current time, none of that is graded. It's if they do well, they can increase grades, but it's not going to harm them if they don't do well. But in this coming school year, this whole process is going to change, where the same kind of engagement's going to happen, but there will be grades, and teachers are going to be evaluating, how well and how proficient students are in the various areas. We utilize multiple curriculum materials that are online and are supported not only online but also through text. And so all of our kids have their Chromebooks. Some of the families, we've actually provided a way to access the internet because they did not have that on the natural. Many of the families have multiple Chromebooks so that each student can spend the time that they need doing their lessons. It's been a massive challenge, and we have, if you think in terms of special needs students, there are individualized education programs that have very specific, criteria, very specific action items that need to be followed. And so we are doing our level best to meet those needs as much as possible through this distance learning model. It's still a challenge, and I'm sure it's something that will continue to evolve. But there's a lot of empathy, and that's going around for the entire, through our student population, but also for our instructors, our teachers. As everybody knows, it's a challenging situation, but we will do our level best to make sure that students don't lose ground.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley.
All right. Well, some of the points that have been brought up in regards to the logistics of things, devices, connectivity, hotspots, it does play out very differently in each community. We have had, for the most part, some good luck with having enough devices at this time. Now, we aren't one-to-one for kids, but we do have devices should families say, my goodness, we've got 4 kids, one device is just not going to work. Can we get some others? And we've been able to accomplish those things. With the connectivity piece, we've established, we're lucky in our area that it's not as big an impact. And for our families that where it is, we are providing hotspots in that regard. I'm seeing in the chat a number of issues about 5G cell towers on the school sites. We hear about that quite often. Murrieta Valley does not have 5G cell towers on its properties, on its campuses, and we do not have any plans to install them. That seems to be a topic that comes up in a lot of circles, and so I hope that sets it to sets that point aside. Now, in regards to what's happening for every classroom, this is the part that is, I think, as Dr. Kennedy has said, and it's important, and it's an important reminder, we have had a response to a health crisis to be able to do the best that can be done in this type of situation. So you have seen a mix of live instruction, of video instruction that can be accessed later on, to posting of assignments. And I'm the first to admit it can vary among teachers. We have given our teachers the ability to establish what it is that they are, what it is that is the learning objective that they're trying to get to, and they establish that. But we have had over 500 of our educators, this is both teachers and aides, who are using live instruction. It can be whole class. It's occurring more in small group settings. We're wanting to reach out more and more, especially to our special education students. These are our students who are most impacted with these closures, and trying to create those connectivity options on a personal level even more. So those are some of the things occurring within our area.
Dr. Pyle.
I think it's the great $1 million question. Really, it's what we're doing right now, in my own personal opinion, isn't going to be sustainable when we enter into the 2021 school year. We're in a very reactive mode. It was something that obviously we were not able to foresee or plan for. March 13th is a date that always really hits hard for us, because that was technically the last day of in-seat instruction. And we were poised with the task of starting that next week of what does a distant learning response look like. I'm sure that the superintendents on the line would agree with me in the sense that we have very similar, for example, grading procedures for the remainder of the year. Although there may be some variations, most districts have taken the stance that last day of instruction, March 13th, a student's grade could not be negatively impacted based on the remaining of the time in the school year for a number of issues. One, the instruction is different, but really it ties into an equity and an access issue as well. Using that example, we can't start the beginning of the 2021 school year with that same mindset. We really need to make sure that we're doing the work behind the scenes of what does a robust program look like, whether that is remote, hybrid, or in person, and most importantly, how are we making sure that we're not just holding steady, but really taking that proactive response and, using the football term, playing offense instead of defense, because you really can't underestimate the value of a positive or a proactive education for our students. So it's a challenge, something that I think will continue to be developed, but really taking the time and background of preparing for all 3 or 4 different potential scenarios.
Mr. Ritter.
I think so much of what has been said, I don't want to be repetitive, But what we are currently working under is a response to something that none of us were planning for. On March 13th, we found out that our schools were closing. And just speaking for Temecula Valley, we did not have any, well, we had about a 2 or 3 week lead time thinking that that was a possibility. And I remember sitting in meetings saying, well, I just hope we get through Easter break. I just hope we get through spring break and then everything will be okay. Boy, was I short-sighted. Missed that quite a bit. So we had a couple of weeks to try to get ourselves positioned to respond. So certainly what we're doing currently is not developed to a level where, at least I'll speak for our school district, where we feel that it's what we hope we can provide for our students, but it was the best we could do. And our people worked really hard. I mean, I don't want to minimize it. For the short period of setup time we had and preparation time, I felt our people did amazing to get us to where we are. But moving forward, we are right now developing all kinds of programs that will provide a level of rigor, expectation, accountability that are lacking in what we currently do. We were just bridging the gap and trying to provide as meaningful experience as we could to get to the end of the school year. Moving forward, it's for real. And so we have to have programs that will provide the, like I said, the rigor, the accountability, all of those things that will need to be in those programs moving forward. There's a lot to that though, just not the planning, just not the development of the program, but the professional development components as well. Our teachers aren't trained in terms of how to deliver instruction through a virtual format. So there's a lot that still has to be done. And it's been great to have a pilot. We've had the benefit of now a 6-week pilot, and it'll be a little bit longer than that we can get a feeling for where the gaps are and begin to fill those in. But this is some heavy duty lifting. And much like Murrieta, Temecula Valley and Menifee, Temecula Valley is not a district where we are afforded the opportunity to provide one-on-one devices. We don't have a device for every student. We just don't have a budget that affords that. So we're trying to fill in the gaps with devices that are in homes and asking families to allow students to use those devices for their learning. And when they don't have that or they don't have enough, then the district comes through with it. But if this becomes a part of our norm as our reality moving forward, we're going to have real challenges in terms of filling those gaps and making sure that we have access and equity. Surprisingly, accessibility hasn't been a big issue for us during this time period. We've been able to fill in the hotspots and get devices in every student's hands. Moving forward, if this is part of our operating norm moving forward, we have real challenges ahead, and not just in securing the devices, but teacher training, curriculum development, all kinds of things that will be, like I said, heavy lifting moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett.
Yes, this is a very complex thing that we are continually dealing with without a pandemic, right? How do you meet the individual needs of learners? And of course, we're going to be in a position to regroup. And I think it was Doug that mentioned it earlier, in that there will be positive that comes out of this, and that it's pushing us into a space that we need to be anyway, I think, as it relates to providing flexible learning spaces for our children. We know that the current model of public education, and once again, just with a very broad stroke, age-based placement into a grade level, that there's opportunity to improve that. And so I think for For some, this is going to be the opportunity to accelerate some change that needed to occur anyway. So all of that to say, as everyone else has indicated, like, we're going to have to be very savvy and intentional in how to, one, determine what are the needs of our students, right? Yes, there will be learning loss that occurs, but that will not occur at the same rate for all children. And there will be some that maybe have even accelerated just because of the experiences that they've been given within their homes, and because of what the work of parents, families, and educators are doing. So how do we take an individualized approach to determine what are the needs of students, and then how do we mitigate that need? And I think that's for both our students that are traditionally considered regular education students, as well as our students with disabilities. I think another aspect of what we are working through is not only the academics. I don't think I need to share with any of you that public schools are charged with many things in addition to academics. Mental health is also a very big space that we fill, and so we're currently working with our partners, and we just recently had a call actually with providers here in the Valley and with Jacinto Unified, as well as how are we going to really triage the needs of the community as it relates to mental health services once we reopen. As it relates to our students with disabilities, we recognize that we have not been able to provide services as we traditionally have been. How are we going to go back and provide comp ed services? Because even though learning loss might look different for our students with disabilities, the reality is that there are services that they should have been receiving that they have not been able to during this time. I think another thing that we're needing to plan for, in addition to learning loss, is, let's just say for funsies, that we can reopen in normal. And I think it was Mr. Kelley that mentioned earlier that I don't think it will ever be normal again, right? It's going to be different. But what if we are able to reopen? What about families who say, you know what, thanks for reopening, but we don't agree. Like, we don't think it's safe to send our kids to school, and so we're going to choose to do that. Well, then how are we then as school districts going to respond to that demand to provide learning opportunities? And I think, Pat mentioned it earlier, in that we're going to have an obligation to be responsive, that even though school may be open, we have to honor that families may not want to return back to that space in the way that they traditionally have. I think the last two things I'll say to this, one is that professional development, and I think it was Tim that spoke about this, and I apologize if it wasn't, but we are already actively engaging our educators in professional development around online learning platforms and distant learning, because once again, it's not about the device. The device will never replace a teacher. It's about how are you engaging with the learner through the utilization of the device. And so our PD has just been very well received by our teachers. Every session that we offer is filled to capacity, and so we're just constantly now creating new opportunities so that our teachers can engage. The last thing that I'll address is the towers. I'm not very clear as to what the actual question is. If you want to maybe formulate that so that we can answer it with some succinctness, I would appreciate that. The cell towers are not the districts, meaning that we have some cell towers on Hemet property, Hemet USD property, but that property is leased by the cell tower folks, and we generate a little bit of revenue, but not a lot. And the revenue that we do generate from leasing that land is utilized to provide scholarships to our seniors every year. So I don't know if that is the question or not. What I will tell you is that those cell towers are not used to provide access necessarily to the internet. What we are looking to create here in Hemet Unified, and this will be with our partnership with Hewlett Foundation, is to create our own LTE network so that regardless of where students are, they will be able to have connectivity to be able to connect to their classrooms. So we do not yet have a date as to when that project would be completed, but obviously we're working on getting all of that in motion. One of the unique challenges that we face in Hemet Unified School District is we do not just serve the city of Hemet or the the boundaries here in the valley, if you will. We extend up into Idlewild, Anza, and Awanga. And so connectivity in our outline areas is also very challenging. And so the LTE network that we're looking to develop would also include those service areas. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. We'll finish this one with Dr. Kimberly.
Well, a lot of information has been shared by my colleagues, but I do think we would all agree that we're going to be a lot different in the fall, and a lot different being we realize that families in some cases have a fear of coming back to school. So we also have to recognize that our enrollment and our attendance is going to be subject to charter schools and homeschools and other opportunities that families have. So we are trying to address that by putting our distance learning program together that can be highly competitive so that we can maintain the responsibility to educate the community that we serve. I think that there will be, and has been, a recruitment of public school students by charter schools and homeschoolers actively in this pandemic, because they've been doing some of the distance learning a little bit longer. And so competition is going to come into play, and competition generally makes everyone a little stronger. And so our teachers have been since March 13th, and as we speak today through Zoom, they are putting together and continuing to evolve our program. It's also, when we talk about distance learning, we have to realize that in some cases, we're educating kids that are 4 and 5 years old through high school. And as we saw at the beginning of this town hall meeting, that sometimes there are hiccups in that regard. Had we been a class of second graders at the beginning of this Zoom meeting with a little bit of kind of fragmentation, imagine what those second graders would be doing. We were all patient enough to see it through and got our town hall going and are able to exchange a lot of information. So our teachers are learning how to try to control some of that and adjust to situations, because they're not tethered in a classroom situation where you could walk over to a desk and say, okay, Doug, let's redirect and reconcentrate on what you're doing for that class. So it will be an exciting opportunity for that. I think that I saw a question on the chat in regards to distance learning and attendance and enrollment. That is a question that I hope the state addresses. It was not addressed in the state May revise, which was very unfortunate. We had a proposal to look at a funding source that would allow for enrollment-based revenue versus average daily attendance that would have allowed school districts to really stay at a level watermark of, I think Christy mentioned a 10% cut. I think that's very conservative. If we're on an attendance-based or an ADA traditional role that we've been, and we happen to have an intermittent closure and a public fear, I think our enrollments would stay the same, but our attendance numbers would drop dramatically percentage-wise. We've anticipated that we could see an attendance rate, if we have intermittent closures, in the 80% range, which would compound the May revise cuts immeasurably for us and for all of my colleagues too. So I think there's a lot of discussion in regards to, as we try to meet the needs through distance learning of those families who choose to do it, how the revenue structure for the state needs to be revamped to account for that, because currently it doesn't. And so that's an unanswered question that we're going to need some legislative help on. Thank you.
Thank you. So while we're talking about budget issues here, that's my next question. Obviously, the governor's May revise, which you presented last week, also contains a priority, I believe, for $4.4 billion in federal funding to address learning loss and equity issues that have been exacerbated by the COVID-19. These funds are earmarked to be used for special summer programs, other programs that address equity gaps and that have widened during school closures. The funds can also be used to make necessary modifications to the schools so they're prepared to reopen in the fall, help parents' ability to work. The May revise also, I think, preserves the number of state-funded school childcare slots, access to childcare for first responders. So I guess one question is, first of all, being in Riverside County, how much of that actual 4.4 billion do you think will actually trickle down to us, since we usually get nothing or next to nothing when the state is in charge of allocations? But the second thing is the question that has been raised in chat and so forth, which has to do with fewer students attending and that sort of thing. If you're saying, conservatively a 10% cut in attendance and potentially much higher than that, what's going to be the impact, and how do you move forward with when you're being called upon to provide a wider range of services than you traditionally have, and yet your income is going to go down? So let's start the answers here with Dr. Kimberly.
Well, thank you very much. I think that the CARES Act 4.4 billion, as proposed by the governor, is still subject to a lot of debate. As I understand, the legislature is still unclear as to the priorities of that 4.4 billion. So right now, I'd say we're in a little more than a coin flip that money stays with education, which again is still an important piece for this discussion as we go forward. The governor has made a commitment to education with some caveats, as you've alluded to, but there are a lot of other agencies that are vying for that CARES Act money, and largely even in public health. That is still probably our #1 advocate for our kids in regards to keeping them safe, but also adversary in regards for the use of that CARES Act. I believe that we will know a little bit more about the CARES Act towards the end of this month, and it will be important as we try to develop a plan of advocacy for how those funds are distributed. In Riverside County, we have somewhat haves and have-nots, those districts such as ours that serve a large population, over 50% of students that have socioeconomically disadvantaged, and those districts that don't. And so we in Riverside County are trying to come together to determine how can we help all the districts if that CARES Act is available for education, how can it be distributed equitably to help the learning gap throughout. And in Southwest Riverside County, we have a couple of districts that happen to be on this call that we're all advocating for as we try to serve our mission of public education. But I'm not confident, to be perfectly honest, that the CARES Act is going to come to educators as we believe, as 4.4 billion, as it's subject to legislative debate. So, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kennedy.
So thank you, Dr. Kimberly. You're basically tooting our horn. We don't count a lot on federal funding. We don't have the percentage of students that are on free and reduced price lunch, so we don't get a big bite of any federal monies that come down. So we do rely heavily on what the state provides us based on our average daily attendance. With a 10% cut, one of our priorities is to keep the cuts away from the classroom as much as possible. I happened to be in as an assistant superintendent when we went through the recession. And that was one of the things that we absolutely stuck to. And so we did not lay off any teachers. The only people that were laid off were a manager, and he ended up being the mayor of Menifee. Tell me how that worked out. That was an interesting one. But it's just, we will have to go through, and we have our go-to lists, and we're keeping it as far away from the classroom as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley.
I think Doug said things extremely well. What the governor sent out last week with the May revision really was a first shot at a new proposal based on the circumstances that are there. So we're all watching very carefully through June 15th, because that's a statutory deadline when the legislature will approve a budget to either have him sign or not sign. And we're watching that very closely in regards to the impacts. for general fence posts, you throw out, these figures are thrown out, and it's difficult for the average citizen to understand how it may or may not impact things. But in general, we're looking at 10% less funding in a good situation. And that is, that's just the condition that I think is going to be present for education. It's certainly present for lots of industries as we see our economic impact take effect across many, many industries. So we're watching very closely for that June 15th timeframe. We work very closely with the county, who has an advocacy leg, to be able to advocate and promote for Riverside County and Southwest Riverside County interests, so that we can do the things that we've been talking about, trying to provide that choice that is going to be needed for families, depending on what they believe needs to occur, based on the significant professional development, because we will have a large portion of students and families who are wanting to continue in a virtual environment. And so that it is incumbent that becomes of the highest quality. I have no doubt that we won't be able to answer that for the new school year, but how we get from point A to point B, there's still a lot of those unknowns that are coming, and a lot of those get based on what will happen monetarily with Sacramento and the legislature.
Always. Dr. Pyle.
Yeah, the May revise provided us with some pretty good information. Unfortunately, it's not going to be solid information. Prior to that revise, I believe the number was $53 billion cut we were looking at initially. And with all of the tax deadlines being pushed back all the way even till July 15th, as districts, we're required to adopt our budget by the end of June. And so it's really playing around with that moving target and preparing for multiple scenarios. But one thing that we often refer to in education is the out years. And although we are focused on, say, 2021, I'm really planning for that 22-23 school year as well. And how are those lasting impacts going to really impact education? I agree with Steve. I think it's a very common sentiment where we want to keep cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. But with that being said, a 10% hit to education as it now stands is going to be felt on multiple levels. We already run a pretty lean operation in education as a whole. And we hear often people, not programs, which I in turn would agree with. People are at the heart of an educational system. But those programs that are also potentially going to be lost or cut back are going to have impacts. So we're preparing and would really want to make sure that the group understands the focus is not just an immediate one, but really looking at those out years as well, and making sure we're able to sustain those costs and commitments.
Mr. Ritter.
I think when I think about the 10% cut, obviously that's, I'm not going to say catastrophic. I had the opportunity to be the superintendent during the last recession. And so I know these things are weatherable. You just have to be very strategic and intentional in terms of what you do. I just think that right now we're positioned in a challenging place to not only have to endure budget cuts, but also pretty significant changes in how we operate. The reality of it is we will probably not be coming back to an environment that's consistent with what we know and what we've done. And so I've mentioned earlier the fact that there's a lot of work to be done to be responsive to those changes. And that type of work takes funding, it takes money. And so in a time when budgets are reduced dramatically and changes are imminent in terms of how we operate, the two are going to create a dynamic that will be challenging to all of these school districts. And it's one of the things that I feel for my colleagues in regards to the fact that they're going to have to figure out and navigate this, provide the level of professional development, make sure that there is adequacy in terms of devices for students, that we may not be able to accommodate large, the traditional class sizes that we had. So structurally, how are you going to respond to this? So the budgetary reduction, as dramatic as it is, and as challenging as it will be, in my opinion, is only exacerbated by the time that we're in and the challenges that are going to be because of that. So it's really not simply a dollar and cent issue that people are dealing with. It's how do we make changes that are going to have fiscal implications at a time when our budgets are reduced. That has me most concerned.
Dr. Barrett, final word on this.
I agree with everything that's been stated, and not to be doomsday, but I also just want to put an underscore under what Doug stated, and I think it's 10% on a good day, right? Because what that number doesn't take into consideration is declining enrollment. As a state, we were already experiencing declining enrollment, and also just the issues around attendance, right? We're funded on ADA, our daily attendance, and so with that, more to come, right? And I think too, Dr. Pyle makes a great point in that right now the May revise is here, but the reality is that there may be future adjustments in the budget depending upon how the tax receipts come in, knowing that timeline has been pushed back. So we are, I would say we're not looking at only implications for the upcoming school year, but I think the implications are probably going to be several years out in terms of the recovery for public education here in the state of California.
Thank you. Next question is, there have been reports or rumors, I guess, that as many as 20% of students have fallen off the radar during this time, and that's not specific to Southwest County. That's kind of a statewide number. Some of those students may have just decided to check out since their grades won't suffer if they don't do anything. But there are concerns that others may be facing more serious problems, particularly child abuse. Kids for whom your school was really their only safe place. Do you have any tracking or contact systems in place that can help account for the safety of these children? And I'll start this with Dr. Pyle.
Yeah, that's a great question, and an area that is in drastic need of attention. I think that was one of the portions of our educational system, is as much as you are able to prepare the impacts that are taking place, unfortunately in reality during a traditional school year are difficult to control outside the classroom or once the child is at home. But I have reviewed the statistics and they are alarming, and that is something that we as an educational organization need to improve on. We do provide a number of outreach opportunities for families. I think the missing link lots of times is making sure that the families have that information. This would be a good time to promote for both Newview and San Jacinto. We use work with an organization named Care Solace, and you can find the information on the district's website. And really what it is, it's not a third-party provider, but more of an opportunity for an organization to be able to hear the needs of individual families, individual students, and being able to put those families in contact with some support, help organizations here in the Riverside County. But that is something that the educational system as a whole will need to address moving forward, and definitely an area that's in need of improvement.
Mr. Ritter.
You got it. We're responsive when we find that students aren't attending right now virtually. We have counselors and other intervention specialists that are following up immediately to try to engage them, get them back, check in, kind of just a follow-up to make sure that students are okay and engaged. But I think that really your question is incredibly pertinent in the fact that I think the greatest social issue we've been facing, at least in Temecula Valley Unified, over the past couple of years is social emotional issues. Dr. Barrett alluded to this earlier in one of the questions, and I think, again, moving forward as students begin to return, and I know your question was specific about child abuse, but I think I just want to put it under an umbrella of just social emotional issues that our students are facing. The degree of depression, anxiety that is within our community of learners has grown dramatically over the years. And then this pandemic and all of the repercussions of it are just going to make that situation so much greater. And we're going to have to be prepared. We're going to have to be positioned to be able to not only provide the education, the textbook education for students, but we've got to be responsive to the social emotional issues that these students are going to be bringing back to the campuses in greater number than we've ever experienced before, at least in my opinion. And that is also going to be a challenge moving forward when you talk about budgetary restrictions and just finding these professionals in the community and getting them with students. So I think the question you just asked on a grander scale is probably the biggest question we need to be asking ourselves right now as public educators, and that's how do we respond to the social emotional needs of our students coming forward. If they're not healthy, they can't learn. And so everything stops there.
Thank you. Dr. Barrett?
Yeah, I think, Tim, you just had a mic drop moment, and that I think you said it well. Mental health issues and reaching out to our children and families, it's just become such an important need that we as school districts are trying to fill, and it's only going to be more so when this is all said and done. So I think the short answer is yes, we're resting heavily on our educators and having them reach out to families and to children, and and when we're not able to reach a family, then understanding that, do we go knock on doors? What is the next step? Obviously, with our homeless youth, our foster youth, we have very explicit ways in monitoring those children. However, the frightening part is it's, and I don't mean this, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, in that we have children that we've identified as being homeless. Those families are easier to support than those that are homeless that haven't indicated to us that they are. Right. And so we are very concerned about that portion of our community, and that they may not have indicated to us prior to the closure what the need is. And so then how do you go about finding them and trying to connect them to the resources that they need? And that goes back to, I think, what Dr. Pyle had said earlier. We too are part of Care Solace, which is a case management type system, as he indicated. But understanding that school districts can't go this alone. And so what we're doing here in the San Jacinto Valley is not only connecting as two school districts serving one valley, but also reaching out to our other partners, such as, Community Pantry, Salvation Army, CASA. There's a variety of organizations here that we're really needing to pull together to triage the needs of our community, and of course the families that reside within it.
Terrific. Dr. Kimberly, you're up next.
I think that the social emotional learning piece is one that we've all tried to evolve and seen a rise, and this pandemic has brought that to the forefront. We made a commitment to create social emotional learning coaches who work in our classrooms normally with our teachers, the kids, and families. Part of their responsibility in this pandemic was to reach out specifically to the kids that have not been engaged and find out how things are going through Zoom meetings, through telephone calls, through even knocking on doors and leaving flyers for numbers to call We've been a little hesitant to have direct contact in that regard, but we've done everything we can to reach out because we have seen certainly an increase in that. We've seen an increase in, especially with our elementary school kids. I think we heard earlier a feeling of withdrawn and a feeling of lack of socialization and isolation just isn't part of the human experience. So all of those emotions have become to the forefront. We've been trying to give encouragement and support over the telephone and Zoom to families who've had those questions as well. And also we've seen some frustration on behalf of parents. One, there's quite a bit of economic collateral damage by being at home and not being able to work. So they're feeling the pressure. They're feeling the pressure of trying to assist our teachers and staff in educating their children, and that's compounded things. So every time we can make a parent contact and provide support, it's been very well received, and we'll continue to do that as much as possible. We plan to do that throughout the summer as well, depending on how long this pandemic continues on for. But I think that the issue about social emotional learning that everyone has added to, and the question alludes to, is very large and very real. And this, not only the class of 2020 has been subject to the short end of the stick of this pandemic, but kids in K-12 education itself. And so we only see not just a loss of learning opportunities, but a loss of socialization, a loss of human interaction, and those skills that are lifelong. And we're gonna have to recover for quite a while to retrain kids in that socialization of what are our social norms and interactions as they go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy.
So as my colleagues have stated, this COVID-19 environment has exacerbated the issues that we had long since identified with regard to social emotional well-being and mental health, to the point that we increased our level of counseling support at every school site and multiple counselors at all of our middle schools. And so they are actually involved in an outreach, whether they're dealing with small groups or they're doing one-on-one kinds of counseling. We also are, like many of the other districts, we utilize Care Solace, and we have done outreach with that so that people feel comfortable making that call. You know, Menifee was the unfortunate area that where we had a family that suffered the ultimate tragedy. And so this is something that's at the very forefront of our thinking. That's how we are addressing the social emotional piece.
And Patrick Kelley, last answer on this to you, sir.
All right. Well, you know, most of our students, I think we're down to a handful that we haven't been able to make contact with because I think some families may just pick up and go, but it's a very, very small amount. Those who actively engage academically for us has been hovering between 75 and 80%. And it goes up and down as the weeks go on. And there's an expectation of that because like I said, families are in different places. The efforts over the last 6-7 years towards social emotional health and those programs and supports that have been put into place have been huge. And I'm thankful for that, especially in this time, because we have counselors, psychologists who are interacting individually with both parents and with kids who need that specificity and that kind of support. The organization Care Solace has been talked about, and this is so important for the region to understand that this support is out there because mental health is not necessarily a student issue, it is a family unit issue. And if it's not going well with one member of the family, it trickles right on down to students. And so this is an umbrella organization that can get professionals connected, whether they are students or whether they are a parent or a family member that's unaffiliated with the schools. And that's the arrangement we have set up for anyone within the Murrieta community that can do that. Tied to this, one of the things that we're looking at going forward, and while we don't know all the answers in regards to funding and what's there, Back in the Great Recession, our district took a position that to the greatest extent possible, we're going to keep people and programs in place. Education is a labor-intensive industry. We don't need stuff as much as people think. We need people to provide services and supports directly to students. And so when we talk about, are you going to cut this or cut that? Our board has made a commitment to not cut those programs to the greatest extent possible. And instead we shoulder together. And what that meant for us 12 years ago was a 10 to 12% pay cut that was enacted. Now that is something we have to work with our stakeholders through. But that's what we did in order to be able to keep these important programs in places for kids so that when we come out of this, which we will, that we come out strong, healthy, with quality in place, ready to go forward.
Thank you. Last question, and again, I appreciate all of your time just immeasurably today. And I know there have been some questions that have come up in the chat that we've not been able to address. Some of those have been very specific questions, like what a program will look like, a shared time program and so forth going forward. And I think you've answered some of that, you know, going forward, those things are still in the works. I mean, you've had time to work on them and we'll continue to refine that going forward. So some of these answers are not currently available. My last question has to do with something that's near and dear to my heart, advocacy. And I know that, you know, I work with a group of local mayors that are trying to put pressure on the county. I work with a group of county mayors who are trying to put more pressure on the county and the state, and a statewide group of mayors, again, working advocacy on behalf of all of our constituencies at the state level. And I know that a couple of you have mentioned advocacy as well. And so I'm just curious as to what form that advocacy takes. And I would suspect that just like we are, you're all on calls on a regular basis and Zoom meetings with your counterparts across the county, with your counterparts across the state. And I'm wondering kind of what form your advocacy takes, and are you working in concert with or opposed to or separate from the California Teachers Association, who also has a very strong, obviously very strong lobbying organization. So I'll start this last round with Dr. Barrett.
Yes, a lot of complexity in terms of the response that I would like to give. And I just think that this could be a whole nother hour and a half just in and of itself. And even in regards to what is it specifically that we're advocating for, right? And I think, you know, one of the things that I just want to once again accent is that we are not public health officials. And so, you know, in terms of when school starts back or not starts back, all of those logistics, I don't want to speak for the rest of the superintendents, but my perception is that to date, we have stayed pretty locked arm in that, you know, we are going to follow the guidelines of public health and be objective in that way, because at the end of the day, this is a public health crisis, and it just so happens that obviously there are many sectors of our life that have been negatively impacted by that, and public education is one of them, right? So I want to start that first, and that our response will be guided by public health. With that, yes, there are a lot of spaces that are advocating for public education that many of us involved. AXA, CSBA, which is the California Schools Board Association, our associations, meaning CTA, CSEA, there is a lot of advocacy. And I think, you know, a lot of this is around the funding of public education. We of course are needing support as it relates to how are we providing services to students with disabilities, a lot of different directions, right? And so I think all of us are very actively involved. As Pat mentioned earlier, our COE has, you know, has its own advocacy and is very intentional about reaching out to superintendents to get our input. Several of us sit on that here in Riverside County. And so I think that's the short answer. We're involved in a lot of spaces. We have our fingers in it. We're not going to let it happen to us. And, you know, we're really trying to advocate in things around funding. As Doug mentioned earlier, attendance, how does that affect our funding? How are we providing services to children? The things that we can control. So I think that's the best I'm going to be able to do in the short time that we have left, and wanting to give others an opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Dr. Kimberly.
I think I would suggest that advocacy tends to be a long-term vision. There tends to be great planning and great thought behind most advocacy for long-term change. We find ourselves in a different situation. Much like our COVID response to instruction, I would say we need a COVID response to this pandemic, and in our advocacy with a short term. I think we need to think long and hard about some short-term solutions to get through this pandemic, and then look to the long-range vision after that. There are 3 or 4 topics that I think will be crucial to public education in the short term that could even be temporary solutions advocated for. And if not, we'll put a lot of pressure on our system so that we have to make further decisions that would impede our ability to maneuver and really answer some of the logistical questions that have been on the chat as well. So I think we're in a different time, and I think Riverside County Office of Ed has done a really good job of trying to look at what are our short-term needs to get through the next couple of years from this budget and the economic, we hope, upturn, and then what would be our long-term strategy. And I believe they are 2 different things. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kennedy.
So, you know, given our country's recent history, it would appear to me that big corporations get bailed out, schools get cut. And so it's interesting because it really is our future that we're playing with. So in terms of advocacy, we are linked arm in arm with our different labor group representatives, CTA, MCCE, and we are talking with our legislators. We are sharing what our experiences are at the club level. Like, for instance, I'm in the Rotary Club Menifee, and so I keep everybody abreast as to what is happening in our schools. It's going to take all of us coming together in order to help support what we are going to have for tomorrow. Our goal is that everybody is successful, and people sometimes that are not involved in education or don't feel that necessarily, they kind of miss that. And so it's important that we make sure that we keep a mind on the future and we share what our experiences are. Melissa Melendez has been a strong supporter of us. And I think that the politics sometimes get in the way, even when we have the right advocacy. But it's something that we need to continue to work together in order to make, you know, a true change happen.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley.
Well, my colleagues have shared some important considerations. The politics around this, we see it playing out nationally, at the state level, and regionally. As school districts, we fall under the authority of various entities. And so as rules change, so as the Riverside County Board of Supervisors shifted some of the restrictions, we quickly shift with that. And so we're going to be falling under the same way that cities fall under whatever authority is in place, while we continue to work to do what needs to happen for the benefit of kids. And for us, and where our focus is, and I think I started the conversation this way, we want to see students come back to school in the traditional program. That is our first and guiding goal. The realities may not allow for that. And so as such, we have to adjust and we have to be ready. But our eyes aren't being taken off of that goal as being the preferred model of what people want. And as the different types of regulations or guidelines come down, we fall under the authority of that. And so we will implement those responsibly and safely. But in the same regard, we realize schools are a central part of being able to be an answer to the economic answer of getting our region back to work and being able to provide that very important service for care for kids during the school day so parents can do their thing.
Thank you. Dr. Pyle?
Well, in terms of advocacy, I really think it begins and ends with the safety and well-being of our students and staff. One of the terms that's often not used anymore with the current pandemic, we've referred to it as COVID-19 and coronavirus, but initially termed the novel coronavirus, and I think that term is important. Novel being new, and it was something that we really did not have a good understanding on how everything was going to unfold. And I look at that through a public health lens, and Dr. Kaiser, who works closely with Riverside County, and for us to even predict what our educational program is going to look like come fall, for him to have that responsibility and tasked with how is this going to impact the overall public health of a county is just impossible to do. So of course, hindsight being what it is, 2020, yes, some of the numbers have panned out differently, but during this entire time as educators, the advocacy of student health and well-being, not just educationally, but on the mental health side of things as well, is personally where I'm strong in regards to advocacy. But with that being said, I do know how the system works. It's public funds generated, and we do need to make sure that we are taking note of that and getting life back to where we were, making sure that the economy is redirected to growth, and it really is a big machine that counts on one another to work hand in hand.
Mr. Ritter, you have the final comment on this one, sir.
Awesome. We work together to advocate as an organization of superintendents in Riverside County. We're all members of a number of professional organizations that extend that to state levels and national levels, that lobby for laws and political advantage. But I think what it all boils down to, and the 6 people on your screen today all went into education as professionals because we wanted to advocate for students. And that's what drives us. That is our why. That is what gets us up in the morning and charges our engines to want to be difference makers in the lives of our kids. And so in order to do that, I believe all of us also recognize the value and the importance of supporting and advocating for our teachers, who are the front line in terms of influence with our students, and those individuals that support the classroom from behind. I don't think there's any one of us here that would say that isn't what makes that is not what drives us. It is about our students. It is about caring for them. It is about advocating for them and fighting for them, each individual group, each individual student. And though as superintendents, we've lost that ability to get to know every one of them like we did when we were teachers, when we were in the classroom, and we had those personal relationships that even extended all the way up until we were principals. We were all on fire for our kids, and I imagine that still remains the same for each one of these individuals. And I can only speak for myself. That is where I am, and that's why I think it is so important for us to recognize that we have a group of students now, not just our 2020 graduates who are feeling pain because they've lost rites of passages, and that hurts them, and they will recover from that. But we have kids that are TK, that are 4 and 5 years old, that are growing up in a time of fear and being disconnected, that is impacting them in such a significant way that we need to, as an organization, figure out how we are going to respond to that. Because if we don't get that part right, if we don't become advocates for the mental health and social emotional health of our students, our work is going to fall way short. Because as I said earlier, students can't come to class and learn and become productive citizens if they first don't feel safe and healthy. And that is my parting shot in regards to this, and my future advocacy. As I go out and as I retire from the ranks of a professional educator, I am going to find a cause, and I found that cause. It's the social emotional part of our educational system. And I am going to continue to work in regards to finding supports for our kids, because this is a generation of students that is going to need it. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, and thank you all once again. As I mentioned at the outset of this, what you all do, our school districts play such a critical role in our own business. So many people look to the quality of education before relocating their family to our region. And so what you do is right out front in providing the quality of life that so many of our clients are looking for and in fact demand. And I think based on your responses today and how honest and forthright you've been in addressing some of these things, and in fact admitting sometimes that, you know, we don't know the answers right now. It's extremely difficult to, you know, we don't know what the end game is yet. And so I very much appreciate you coming on and sharing this. At time we've had over 300 people watching us today. This has been recorded. We will continue to put it out for our members so that they have some understanding of what you're all going through and in fact what we're all going through. So again, I thank you very much for taking as much of your time this morning as you did. I know you all have extremely busy schedules and probably have you know, 2 or 3 more Zoom meetings scheduled yet today. So once again, thank you all very much. Can't tell you on behalf of the Southwest Riverside County Association of Realtors how much we appreciate what you're all doing for our community. So, so thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.